Hey everyone, I'm Nick and welcome back to the channel. I said last week that I'd be making a video some of you have been waiting on for 2 years, but as has already been the case with this car, it's fighting me and I'm waiting on some more parts. Now, as you may know, the Mercedes S-Class is a reference in luxury cars. They're really comfortable, they come with advanced tech, and they have iconic styling throughout the years. However, some people say that the W140 S-Class that was made from 1992 to 1999 is the last real S-Class because it was built like a bank vault, and the W220, like my $2,000 200,000 mile one right here, was built to a price point. But this doesn't feel like it was built to a price point. This is the Radiator fan assembly out of this S-Class, and it's solid aluminum. Alright, so when we went to test drive this, after changing the blower motor, we turned the AC on and we noticed that there's this crazy whine coming from the fan. So what that most likely means is that either the motor's going bad or a bearing's going bad on the fan. So we're going to replace the fan shroud and motor. Now to do that, this fan shroud is held in with 2 bolts. One is right here, and the other one is right there. First thing we can do is pop this hose off. There's also in here, right there, that's the connector. We'll have to disconnect that before we remove it. And then we look further down in there. Down there is the lower part of the shroud, which just slots in to the core support. And there's another one on the other side, down there. So the 2 bolts that are here and here are 10 millimeters, so we're gonna pull those out. Now, if you want to pull this hose off, you can just pull it back and out of the way, or pull it off the top here. Well, this is a pipe, not a hose. It's an air intake pipe. Oh, what's going on here? At the bottom of the fan shroud, there's also a transmission cooler line that's held on by another 10 millimeter bolt. Now things got a little bit out of focus here, but I pulled the intake pipes out to make a little more room. So you're gonna reach down, pull it out of the lower slots that hold it. So, as it turns out, this hose, there are 2 versions that exist. One like this, which is a hard plastic 90 degrees from the radiator to here, and one that is a rubber 90 that goes into the radiator. Now if you have the rubber 90, you'll be able to flex this out of the way and you can squeeze the frame past if you remove the little rubber bumper on the edge of the little ear down there. But with the hard plastic, unfortunately we do have to drain it, so that's what I'm going to do now. Now to do that, the drain on the radiator is down on this side. Let's see if we can see it here. See that red drain screw? So we're gonna get to that. To do that, we're gonna remove this panel here, which is split, which is the driver's side half of the split here. And it's along with 8 millimeter screws. Probably gonna have to get in and remove 2 screws from the center part there. I brought my jack just in case I need to raise it up a bit, but I should be able to reach. And then we'll be able to drain out. So I have a catch can here, and you're gonna wanna make sure either you use a really clean one or you have coolant ready to replace. You have to make sure you get the right kind of coolant. You have to turn the camera on, but I removed the panel in here. It's held on by 7 or 8 screws. And then actually right here, you can see, that's the bottom of the radiator and the drain, little drain port. It's actually really accessible, and we'll be able to put a catch tray in this area once we undo the hose.
The drain port has a slot in it, so I used a screwdriver to loosen it up. Once it was free, I put the catch pan in place and opened it up.
Drain that down there. Pulled the cap off here. We're gonna watch it through here too. I guess you could technically just remove the hose and just dump it through, but now the way this hose is held on is there's like a metal U-shaped wire that pops up from the bottom. So to pull it off, we have to reach underneath and pry it down. I'll try to do that with this, or a flathead, maybe a screwdriver. Pull it down. I'm hesitant to pull this off just yet, but
the coolant pipe was really on there, so it took some effort to remove. I actually ended up banging my hand on the power steering fluid reservoir when it came loose, so that's something to be aware of.
There's a little bit more than I thought, but it's okay. And it's going to drain to below that port on the radiator, so we won't lose too much coolant. Alright, so the hose out of the way, let's pull the fan shroud out. Easy. And it's out. A lot easier with the hose out of the way. Alright, so this is the part we took off. We can get an idea of how the fan and motor feel by pulling the belt off. So to do that, you could just turn and pull that off. Comes off easy. And you can already hear turning this. That's not ideal. But then, on top of that, that doesn't sound great. This is a junkyard part. I've already taken the belt off, and that's nice and quiet. And this motor may not be perfect, but certainly better. But it's the only spare motor we have, so. I also had another shroud right here, which I think is aftermarket, and it's not bad, but it's got a little more wobble, and you can see right here, a little more wobble, and maybe you can hear a little hiss and click. So I think the best option is going to be to do this one right here. That fan sounds really good. This belt that came off it is better too, I think. To get it on, we'll hook it over one side and get everything turned. Get my thumb glove out of there. Turn it. There it's on. It's pretty good. It looks good. So while the fan shroud's out, it's not a bad time to replace the belt. And I guess anything else you'd want to replace, like idlers, tensioners, and all that, because you have a little more room without the shroud. But it's optional.
Right here we have the tensioner, and we'll need to use the right socket to relieve the tension on the belt.
The way it's routed is alternator down there, idler, power steering back there, compressor, harmonic balancer, tensioner, and I guess water pump there and back. So let's get this done. Be careful with your radiator, you don't want to bang into it. Using the E11. Yeah, this car could use an idler. Probably a tensioner too. As you can hear here, it would probably be beneficial to change that at some point. But when we go back in, we might be doing the harmonic balancer in the future, so we'll just do all that at that time. Take a picture before I take this off. I could certainly use a couple new pulleys. That feels good. Too far. Bring it back. Bring it back. And we're center. Looks good there. Looks good there. Wrapped around. Excellent. Fresh belt. In place. All routed. Had an issue because the belt wasn't centered on there, so I had to readjust it. And we have to use the E11 bit for the shaft because otherwise you'll undo the nut that holds on the pulley on the tensioner. Which I guess means you could just replace the tensioner pulley instead of the whole tensioner, but yeah. This looks like it got a new water pump at some point. Yeah, look at that. Interesting. That's good. So before we put everything back in, this is the little holder clamp that screws into the fan shroud for these lines. And that screws in down here. The motor's already mounted. So, yeah. Alright, we're going to the left side first to get it under that hard line. Ooh, be careful with the radiator itself. Oh, shoot. Hose. Okay. Alright, that's in. Let's try to pop this hose back in place. Before I do that, let me show you how that clip works. So that's how the metal clip works. You pull it down to free it, and then you'll push it back in once it's in place. And there's a little groove on there that you want to make sure it's over, so I'll prevent it from sliding back out.
Just like it was hard to take off, it was hard to put back on. It's really important to make sure it's actually on if it's hard to push like this, because you don't want a nasty surprise of a coolant hose popping off while you're driving.
Almost. There we go. And one thing you can do is look at the groove right by where the metal clip will go into, and make sure it's in place. Or you can leave the metal clip in place, and because there's a flare on the radiator side, it will spread it apart and snap back down once it's in position. Before I put all the bolts back in, I'm gonna pop this connector back on. And it looks like the clip here broke, but it should be fine. And it's plugged in. Now we're gonna have to put our little screw down there for the line, and our two bolts up at the top. Start by the one down at the bottom. Give a little ratchet. Do my best to make sure it's not cross-threaded. You don't want that. Yeah, that feels good. Excellent, excellent. I had to shift the little clip that goes around the line over so that lined up with the little threaded hole. You got it started by hand. It's pretty easy to spin in, so it's not cross-threaded. And I can get my ratchet in. Right, and get the other two up top. On the bolts, I cleaned up the threads a bit. There's a little rust on them, and yeah, should be ready to go. So next step is to pull a vacuum on the system to refill the cooling system. So I've got my vacuum fill tool here. I'm gonna put our compressor air line in here, generate a vacuum in the system. We'll close this back off, check for air tightness, and then we'll drop this into the new coolant container. When we open this valve, it'll suck it all into the system, and we'll be good to go. All right, so compressor's filled up, the line's connected. Let's pull a vacuum.
The radiator hose collapsing is expected with the vacuum in the system.
Cable here, close it, and we'll monitor it. Make sure it doesn't just start dropping down. It looks pretty good. Now you're gonna wanna make sure you put the right coolant in. I had green coolant come out of this. So someone had already been in, flushed it, and put that kind of stuff back in. But you wanna make sure you get compatible coolant with your system unless you drain it completely and flush it. So I'm putting this in because it's similar to what came out. And if you're wondering, this vacuum fill procedure is the procedure Mercedes uses and Mercedes techs use. That's not gonna do. Okay, all right. Now normally I would wanna fill this straight out of the container, but we're gonna use a clean bucket because the way this hose is designed, it doesn't fit into the coolant jug. I'm gonna hold this tip under the water, under the coolant. Open this. Just fill it. And I'm also monitoring the side of the coolant tank. And more coolant in here. I'm also monitoring the hose up front that's collapsed. And right here you can see the level of the coolant, and actually while I waited it dropped down, and the hose over here is still collapsed, so you can see there's still a noticeable vacuum in the system. Vacuum is back to zero. There's water, there's coolant in there, but we'll have to see if it's actually good later on when we start it. It is like a little more vacuum. Oh. Nope. When it's too full, it'll shoot coolant out. Alright, so let's undo this. We'll have to monitor the level. So far, it's pretty good. Alright, let's do this. That's why. Alright. Now, I'll also have to put our under tray back on under there, but I'll do that a little later. We'll have to monitor this when we run the car and get it up to temp. And monitor the temperature, but we'll probably just put it on full blast heat when we run it. Make sure the fan comes on, make sure everything works, and monitor the coolant level and the engine temp. And yeah, that's how you change the fan shroud. Now obviously if you have the 90-degree rubber, and you can get this out without emptying the coolant system, and then you've been done, you're all good, and that's really lucky. But yeah, we did what we had to do, and it went pretty well. And if everything went well with the fill, no crazy bleed procedure, and we're pretty much done. Just top it off if needed. So that's the fan shroud replaced. It used to be possible to order a replacement motor separately, but these days if you want a new part, you need a whole assembly, which is around $500. Used parts can be a bit of a gamble, but we're doing what we can to keep this car budget friendly, and it was just $20 from the junkyard we went to. I do want to point out that this job is specific to the 2000 and 2001 W220 S-classes, because after that they did switch over to a plastic shroud like this one, which doesn't require removing any hoses or draining coolant. So what did you think of this job? I hoped I'd be able to do it without draining the coolant, but it wasn't too bad. Have you ever started a job and found out that you needed to do more than expected? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, and be sure to subscribe to see what other projects we have in store for this car. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.